maximizing their return over, why maximizing return on investment. So we have a short message for you.
Lots of stocks and investments. Amongst his properties are the hectares of land before him. As the risk taker he is, I invested 50% on mixed farming, 20% on livestock production, and 30% on crop farming, all in the hope to get more returns on investments and cash out. To commence work, I put out a signboard and hired anyone who looked fit and agile enough to him. It all felt like things were working out. But things did not turn out like Ayo hoped. He was spending more than he was getting, losing more than he was winning, and he questioned why. It was later revealed to Ayo that his farm hands had been duping him, stealing the produce and earning from it all. He realized it was all his fault. He had simply hired without doing any background check to determine their worthiness. Almost bankrupt, Ayo decided to quit. Later, he meets Joy, who introduces the Know Your Farm Hands app to him and tells him he could better know his farm hands before recruiting them. Know Your Farm Hands is an application that guides a farm owner on recruitment of farm hands with reference to their previous experiences and farmers' encounters about them. Know Your Farm Hands offers seamless means of getting farm hands data before recruiting them. In it, previous employers' review of the employee are uploaded and available to the new employers. Not just that, farmers can also appraise their farm hands for the benefit of other farmers that might want to employ them in the future. You can verify the experience of your about-to-be employed farm hands on the application by just searching with his first name or phone number to get all his data, including his picture, previous farm name, employer, and his review. To get started, download the application for free on Google Play Store. For more information or support, send a mail to support@knowyourfarmhands.ng or visit our website at knowyourfarmhands.ng or call 0905 399 4937 or 0705 368 0191. With Know Your Farm Hands application, I could really cash out and have returns on his investments. With Know Your Farm Hands, farm owners can allay their fears about their farm hands.
Thank you, Know Your Farm Hands. Now we'll go into the webinar proper, and we have a few rules. I'd like to go through them so that we're all aware of what we're in for. For us to have a seamless and uninterrupted session, would please like the host to mute everyone upon entry. Now we'll have questions and comments, clarifications, etc., and we expect that we send those via chat so that we can collate and read out during the question and answer session. We would please like you to make your questions brief and clear to understand. Now, time permitting, we'll be able to take about 2 or 3 contributions from the floor during the question and answer session. And we expect that each contribution should not be longer than 2 minutes. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming our speaker for today, Mrs. Adiza Yaro. Mrs. Yaro, as we know, is an agronomist and marketer involved in market and rural development, in agribusiness and project management. She is the Business Development Manager for East West Seed International. Mrs. Yaro, can we have you, please?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you see?
Yes, we can see your screen.
The presentation? Okay, thank you.
Yes, we can.
Okay, that's fine. I stand on the existing protocol, and then not to waste time, I wouldn't go into introducing myself again. This is a long-awaited topic where farmers have been asking, can we be put through onion production? And not to forget our history too early. in the past 2 years, there has been crisis of onion, where we saw onion price increasing to about 100 to 200%. Onion was more expensive than even apples, so much more that people had to safeguard their shops if they have onion. So the story is not different with India, where the citizens of India can go to war if the country cannot give them enough onion seeds. And we're seeing that translating also into Nigeria. So you're welcome to this webinar. We're going to critically look at onion production. And onion is a crop where we cannot be able to treat all the technicalities in this webinar. So we're considering having a two-phase webinar where we have a part 1 and a part 2, so that people can have enough time to ask their questions, and we'll take our time to actually teach people how to grow onion. Gone are the days where you think onions cannot be grown in the South. We've had several trials. We've had even field days in the South where we have done onion production. So sit back and relax and enjoy the session on onion production. So just to give us a little bit an overview of the origin of onion. Onion has its origin from West Asia. Talking about onion, you can't take away India. Indians are known to be one of the world producers of even onion seeds itself, with a lot of onion research. And looking at onion, onion is grown in over 175 countries across the world. Onion, typically in Nigeria, we know the red onion, but I have a slide which shows different types of onion we have across the world. So we have the white onion, we have the yellow onion. So I have a slide on that. Then the highest yield of onion bulbs is recorded in South Korea, with about 67 tons per hectare. And it will amaze us to know how much we are producing in Nigeria. I wouldn't be too quick in disclosing because we'll still see it in slides to come. So this is just an overview of world production of onion. We have the 6 top world producers of onion, with China being number 1, followed by India, followed by the United States. Next, we have Pakistan taking number 4, Turkey number 5, and then Iran is number 6. One will wonder, where is Nigeria standing? But then right on the map, you can see some dots around Nigeria. So you know that Nigeria is not completely left out in the picture of onion production. So this is just the statistics to show us how much onion is being produced in China, India, United States, Pakistan, Turkey, as well as Iran. This is just a further analysis of the percentages where China occupies, India occupies, some other countries as well as others. And then Nigeria falls into that category of others. Like I stated earlier, we have different types of onion across the world, but majorly in Nigeria, we're more familiar with the red onion. So we have the red onion, like you can see on the screen. We have the yellow onion, and we have the white onion somewhere at the top. But I think close to the red onion in Nigeria, we also see some percentages of white onion, not too popular, but it still exists in the market. So people really like to talk about Naira and Kobo. So this slide is just to give us an overview of what onion is like in Nigeria. So at a glance, what are we talking about when we say onion production in Nigeria? So onion is one of the most important cash crops grown by farmers in Nigeria. Typically, we know we do a lot of onion production in Nigeria in the northern part of the country. And we have not tapped, I think, the potentials in onion as it's supposed to be for several reasons. One, the practices of the smallholder farmers is not in line with best practices. Varieties used has an optimum yield where no matter what they do in terms of improving their agronomic practices, as long as the genetic material is wrong, they get the wrong signals at the end of the day when they do the production. So potential has been stated of about 151 billion naira, but we are not yet tapping into that opportunities yet. And then of course, onion is an important and essential ingredient in most of our food recipes in Nigeria. Then, like I spoke earlier, I need to also further clarify that when we speak onion, we have what we call the dry onion, which is the ones you see in the market, in sacks, in baskets. But then again, we have what we call the green onion. That's a leafy onion where you see it's both the small bulbs and then the onion leaf. People like it to do a lot of delicacies in our diets every day in our homes. So when we're looking at that, Nigeria is ranked number 6 among the 10 producers of green onion. But then yet again, for the dry onion, we had seen our number 1, number 2 to number 6 in the world. Nigeria is rated number 7 in terms of onion production across the world. Then you might ask, where do we grow this onion in Nigeria? We grow in Kano, Kaduna, Jigawa, Sokoto, Plateau, Bauchi, and Kebbi states. These are like the top states that produces onion in Nigeria. Then overall, Nigeria produces about 757 hectares all in a total. And then what tonnage are we getting from this hectarage? We're getting about 1.3 million tons of dry onion. Don't forget the statistics where I showed, we're talking about 1.3 million tons, but we have other countries doing about 20 million tons worth of harvest from even smaller pieces of land that we have than we have in Nigeria. Then for the green onion, we produce about 240,000 tons of green onion in Nigeria. Then one might wonder, what are the kind of production? It's simple arithmetic. If you want to know total productivity, you get the production over the land hectarage, and production in Nigeria is still at about 2.3 tons, according to statistics. If you check Food and Agricultural Organization statistics, this is a data of 2019. Our farmers are averagely getting 2.3 tons, where we have other countries, South Korea getting about what, 68 tons per hectare. It's really amazing. We still are left behind. But recently, we've also conducted a survey where we also want to know in real terms. We surveyed in Kebbi and Sokoto, and we could see farmers struggling to get about 6 tons per hectare. But this is a one-off case where if you calculate it across the number of smallholder farmers doing onion, you wouldn't get so much of these 6 tons per hectare. So averagely, we still are operating in the bracket of maybe 3-5 tons per hectare in the best case scenarios. So we can see that there is a lot of money in this sector, and then we need to tap into it. So let's quickly look at, let's quickly look at onion production techniques. Like I told you, we might not be able to exhaust all the techniques in one sitting, and to be fair enough to our audience, we've decided to break this session into 2, where we shift some other techniques or issues to discuss in another setting. So we quickly look at some techniques in the course of our discussion. So here we try to put a slide to show key producing areas of onion in Nigeria, which is of course not too good, because the industry is an industry we can tap into, but yet we are not making hay while the sun shines. And sometimes, again, it's so sad that farmers feel they know it all, and they'll be like, what do you have to teach them? I have been farming for the past 30, 35 years. My grandfather taught me, my father taught me, and here you are telling me that you will teach me onion production. I think we need to be a little bit more receptive to knowledge sharing let's try it and see if it works. If it doesn't work, you are at liberty to drop it. So we shouldn't just conclude, oh, we know it all and then there is nothing new for me to learn. We have seen the kind of yields we're getting, which is a little bit far off from best practices, which is a little bit far off from what the reality should be. Then just a background, onion is mostly grown for the bulbs and then is consumed as a vegetable in Africa. People don't know that it is a biannual crop, but of course, annual in the sense that we do the first harvest in the first stage or the first life cycle of the onion, but actually is biennial. And it is a profitable crop. So far we've seen, because even at 2.3 tons averagely per hectare, farmers are still happy saying they are growing onion and breaking even. But of course, if you look at it critically, yields can be improved from what we're doing now, and incomes can be improved as well if the yields improve. So it's something we need to look at critically. What is the cost of production of onion, and what are the current maybe market prices at harvest? What are the market prices in 1, 2, 3, 4 months to come if I store it? Questions like that should be what is going through our minds in order to make a profitable venture. Then it is also an important spice in food that we cook. People eat it in salad, raw, and what have you. And it is a good source of calcium, iron, potassium, sources of vitamin, and it has good medicinal properties. Generally, people are skeptical about growing onion. They will feel, oh, it wouldn't survive, or it wouldn't grow well, maybe in the south or in the north, in the west or in the east. But if you know your onion well, you should be able to position and know what period you should plant onion. So altitude between 0 to even as high as 1,900 meters above sea level, it's possible to grow onion, and a rainfall of about 500 to 700 millimeters can be good and sufficient for the cultivation of onion. Temperatures ranges between 15 and 30. I will still have some discussions around temperatures during bulb formation. So soil fertility, it needs a good, well-drained soil with a pH of about 6 to 6.7. Like I said earlier, very low temperatures. It's worth mentioning that in onion production, we have what we call bolting. Bolting simply means the ability of the plant to assume its flowering stage, where if you meet a typical onion farmer that knows onion very well, if he's producing the onion for bulbs, not for seeds, and he begins to see that up to 1% of the total population of the field is bolting, then he should begin to get jittery, because it's not a good characteristics for bulbing onion. You want the onion for the bulbs. So sometimes when the temperatures changes, either too high or too low, automatically the plant will begin, that's the onion will begin to bolt. And for us in the field, when we take the percentage of bolting, we try to do a lot of conclusions around positioning of varieties, because once it bolts, it means it's not good for that particular weather or temperature or what have you. Sometimes when you even maybe withdraw water, maybe the plant feels, oh, it's dying, and then you have a lot of issues around bolting. So one needs to know how to do that, the production very well. And especially where you have the onion for storage, you wouldn't want the bolts, because once it gets bolted, it means it's going to create a kind of a stick in the middle of the onion. And we have what we call curing in onion production. And when you want to cure, it doesn't close, the neck doesn't close. And what is the implication of the neck not closing? It means it forms a secondary source for infection to go in. So sometimes when you look at that middle, you see a lot of some black spots or patches, powdery kind of, that's already a fungal infection entering the onion. Now, once the onion has that in it, then it's very much susceptible to getting rot and things like that. So let's make progress. In this slide, we want to talk about the nursery, raising the seedling nursery. I will talk a little bit about this because we intend to discuss a little bit on the technicals, not completely because we can't exhaust it. So onion can be propagated by seed, which is of course very difficult because anything that you have to deal with, talking about seed, then it becomes very voluminous and bulky. Then the question is, what is the way out? The simplest way out is for you to get the seeds. I was doing some research around garlic, and garlic is also propagated by the bulbs, by the seed. And when I looked at the seed rate per hectare, it was like, it's an impossibility. That's why you see even the production is really, really small. It's quite difficult to do the propagation by the seed set. So going by planting of seeds, most of the times there is a lot of confusion around what volume of seeds or what kilos of seed or what grams of seed do I have to plant on an acre, on a hectare, and things like that. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult when you ask such a question to a technical person because there's no hold and fast rule about it that it has to be a particular quantity. But I think the indices that will lead to the volume of seed you're to use on an acre or on a hectare depends on the spacing. So sometimes when you're too quick to tell the person, oh, you need 2 kilos, you need 5 kilos, sometimes you might get your fingers burned. What if the spacing of the farmer is quite far apart? Then he comes back and say, hey, you just made me to buy so much seed and I've not used even half of it. So I think for our farmers to establish the fact that they need to know the volume of seeds they need to plant on a hectare by calculating the spacing. So once you know the spacing, plus or minus, you have an idea on the volume of seed you need to use, and then you give some allowance plus or minus in case you don't get full establishment of the seedlings. So sometimes it's safer, it depends on your expertise. You add 10%, 20% max, 30% seeds in addition to what you need by default. Paraventure, you don't get good germination or poor handling, you're able to get the required population on a hectare. And then sometimes we discover that farmers are not even breaking even because their population on a hectare is pretty too low. So much more when you check the yield per hectare, it becomes so horrible, except if you want to track the yield per plant, then that gives you an idea. In a typical hectare, when I plant X amount of plants, this is the expected yield with maybe a particular variety of crop. So it is very important we know. So plus or minus, we're looking at a seed rate of about 2 kg per acre. And then if you are to multiply that or translate that into a hectare, you multiply by 2.4. And once you do that, you should be able to get your calculation on a hectare basis. Furthermore, let's discuss a bit on how to establish the nursery. Because of the huge population, a lot of people wouldn't want to go into growing the seedlings on tray because it's huge. So if you can maintain very good nurseries on the ground, it's fantastic to do. One of the key challenges in onion production has to do with even the transplanting, because you talk of a huge number of plants on a hectare, so much more that if you're not careful, the transplanting process is enough to like weigh you down, or you spend a lot of money doing the transplant. So it's important that we create a 1 meter bed wide. It can be as long as 10, 20 meters, it doesn't matter. But the width is good. You have like 1 meter so that you're able to walk from both sides. And sometimes you see farmers doing 1 meter with no space in between. So it's difficult to find your way in to do watering, to do fertilizing, and to do maybe some sort of weeding or thinning or what have you. So it's very important we try to give enough space between one seedling bed to another. And then averagely, if you might need to incorporate manure, fertilizer like compost or cow dung or what have you, but be careful, please. Farmyard manure is quite different from poultry dung. Poultry dung has high level of N, so be careful that you don't mix and say, East it recommended I should put 20 kilos of poultry manure on per meter square. No, note that is a compost or a farmyard manure, which is of course not as harsh as the chicken or poultry manure that we get around. Then it's also important, we need to know, as a rule of the thumb, it's very important for us to have phosphate-based fertilizer when we're dealing with anything that has to do with bulbs or roots or tubers, maybe like carrots, for vegetables like radish, like onion. So at the beginning, it is very important you put phosphate-based fertilizers. It could be DAP, that is diammonium phosphate. It could be triple superphosphate at 20 grams per meter square. So you have to do the calculation to know how many meters square do you have. For example, if you have 1 meter by 20 meters bed, that automatically gives you 20 square meters. So now, if on a meter square, you have to put 20 grams, on a 1 by 20 meters square, it means you have to multiply the 20 by 20. So at the end of the day, you should be ending up with about 400 grams of either diammonium phosphate or triple superphosphate on that 20 meters square. So make a roll of about 15 centimeters apart, and then you drill thinly at about 1 centimeter furrow. Don't forget, like we've had several webinars maybe on tomato production. There are rooms for us to also, or we have in the time past, try to demonstrate to people that you can actually grow quality seedlings even on beds, but in an improved way. As a rule of the thumb, you shouldn't plant a seed more than twice the depth of the size of the seed. What does that mean? It means smaller seeds should remain close to the surface of the soil, while bigger seeds can afford to go even deeper than smaller seeds. There are times where you see people lose a lot of seeds because they plant so deeply, and before the plant try to like shoot out, sometimes it gets rotten and it doesn't even sprout at all. So it's very important that we avoid planting deeply. Why I'm saying that is onion is also one of those small seeds we have to manage on our fields. Then averagely it takes between 7 to 10 days before it germinates. And let's be a bit careful, especially where we try to put the mulching on top of the nursery to prevent maybe adverse effects of maybe sunlight, direct sun impact, or maybe rainfall or anything. We need to be vigilant to take up that mulching as soon as it begins to sprout. If you don't, then you end up with a lot of elongated seedlings. And at the end of the day, you wouldn't like the vigor of the plant, or you would even lose a lot of yields right from the nursery before getting into the permanent field. Then right in the nursery, you also have to deal with irrigating the nursery beds regularly. Sometimes we have issues with farmers where the planting is done, but then there is no follow-up as to when to water, especially when we do the seedling trace production. We need frequent application of water. Frequent application of water does not translate into overwatering or leaving the seeds in a pool of water, especially where you have heavy soils if you're doing the ground nursery. So one needs to be very careful to know when to water and know when to water. If it's getting a little bit dry, you have to water. If it's moist, then there is no need to water. Actually, for seeds to break from the coat, it has to imbibe enough water. It means the seed coat has to be soft before it breaks out of its shell for good germination. So we need to be vigilant, because I've seen cases where people will plant and then they decide not to water for 1-2 days, water the next day and then off the next day. And they will return back and say, hey, the seeds didn't germinate. But then at the end of the day, it might be as a result of poor watering. So please, let's take note. Like I said, immediately after emergence, it's critical that you remove every mulching materials. Then prepare a raised cover. Sometimes if the weather is still harsh, you can't put a raised cover, not directly maybe on the plant or on the ridge and what have you. Also in the nursery, it is very important to manage weeds. It's also important to manage pests and diseases. But people ignore and feel, oh, the nursery, I don't have any dealings with pests. I don't have any dealings with diseases. It's not the case. You have to be vigilant, because like we said, you can lose almost about 50% of your yield only at the nursery. Right, good. So we move to the next slide. Here, I just want to deal with a few varieties we have in the market so that people will have an idea and know what variety to position when. Because if you don't do that, you will get your fingers burned. We have what we call tropical onion, and we have what we call the short day onion. So you have to be careful. Sometimes if you plant the short day onion in the wet season, honestly, I'll tell you, nothing will come out of it. Sometimes you even discover that the germination percentage, even if it's good, because the climate does not favor the germination, you tend not to get germination. We've tried over 2 years now to do a monthly sowing of onion, and we have seen how it has behaved from one season to another. It's also day length sensitive, in the sense that the hours of light exposed to it can determine if the onion will grow or not. So we have to be a little bit careful. So quickly, let me go through a few varieties we have commercial in the market. Prema, which is one of the most popular variety we have in the market, is a dual season variety. Is a tropical onion. I have some characteristics which I'm sure you have read maybe quickly. Dual season as it is, and it has a maturity days of about 110 to 120 days after transplanting. The next one is Dayo. Dayo is yet another variety that matures at about 120 to 130 days. And then it's typical of short day onion, typical for dry season, meaning it's absolutely good at this period to do Dayo. And the good thing is either the Dayo, the Super Yali, which is the third variety I have here, or the Prema. All these varieties are good to go in the main season. But for the raining season, we don't advise you do Super Yali. We don't advise you do Dayo. We advise you stick to your Prema variety. But then in the pipelines, we also have hybrid onion. They are typical of the tropical types of onion, that is Red Star F1 and Red Jewel F1. These are hybrids. We are yet to push into the market because we still feel there is a lot of potential to tap from these open pollinated varieties. Then of course we have another variety which is typical of the short day onion. Zinaria F1. We still have not launched into the market. We still are dealing with the OPs. So I have not prepared a slide for that. I felt I should just mention those varieties. Then let's talk a bit about transplanting. Transplanting for onion, like I pointed out, is not any easy. It's hectic. The population is quite much. You see them quite fragile, and sometimes our farmers are so much in a hurry, they don't allow it to get to full maturity, or sometimes again, the bulbs get too big even at the nursery, and it becomes a challenge for the plant to pick up. So the appropriate time to do the transplanting is between 6 to 8 weeks after sowing. You will discover that between the period of 3 to 5 weeks, the leaves will start forming. So when the base, this is just like an indication, when the base is the size of a pencil, it's like pencil thick, then it gives you an indication that it's time to do the transplanting. But you have to be a bit careful, because this is not like 100% indication. What do I mean? What I mean is, it depends again how dense you do the planting. If you do it very dense, then there will be a lot of issues around competition for light, for water, for nutrient and what have you. Even for space, there is a big competition. So at the end of the day, it will be so difficult for you to attain this pencil size. So even at 8 weeks, the guys will still be thin. They look malnourished. They don't look strong. They don't look vigorous. So one should be careful to ensure that the spacing is done, or the planting is done at a recommended space where the plant has enough space to grow well. Then what is the recommended spacing in terms of doing the transplant? Usually we advise a 15 by 15 meters, although it depends again what you want to do with your onion. Some can go as low as 10 by 15, some can go 10 by 25 or 25 by 30, especially where you don't have like a planned kind of transplanting process to do. And we know most of our farmers is just to dip anywhere the hand reaches, that's where they're going to do the transplant. But if we want to do it in a way where we talk about people getting 50, 60 tons per hectare, not the 2 tons, the 3 tons we're talking about, then we should be ready to do things right. Then again, the following steps are good you take note of for successful transplanting. You might have to do a soil analysis if you so wish. We also have advised you do some kind of manure or compost or application of organic matter of 20 tons per hectare, and do that at least 2 weeks before the transplant. Irrigation of the seedling bed prior to pulling out seedlings. Don't forget, sometimes the ground is so strong and you see farmers trying to uproot and do the transplanting. You will break a lot of roots, and not just breaking a lot of roots. What is the implication of that? It will cause a lot of transplanting shock. It takes time for the plant to pick up. Apart from that, again, it forms like a secondary source for diseases. Sometimes if you have soils with nematodes, it forms a room for nematodes to just jump and then they take possession of your plants. So we need to note that. Then application of about 80 kilos of triple superphosphate. We keep on talking about this triple superphosphate. It's very good for root development, phosphorus. Most of the times in our market, sometimes you discover you don't even have access to some of these single fertilizers. What we have is the NPK 1515, NPK 201010. It's not like it's completely bad, but you need to have at least I know people can get DAP, that is diammonium phosphate. It's possible you get it in the market. So where you don't have the triple superphosphate, DAP is good for your onion bulb formation. There's also a need for you to irrigate the field well a day before transplanting. as a rule of the thumb, we always advise you do watering, sufficient watering before transplanting. When you do a day before transplanting, you allow the water to drain so that you will not walk in a muddy field. So it's very important that we do that. There are times where you see farmers are struggling to do the transplanting on a dry field. What is the implication? The implication is, as you're putting your plant in a dry soil, the soil is already absorbing the moisture from the plant. And if you want to do that before you do the watering, it means before you do the watering, especially for a plant like onion, where it can take you several hours doing the transplanting, by the time you come back, the guys are sleeping, right? So it's not a good practice. And after transplanting, we also advise you water heavily so that the plant is able to absorb as much moisture as possible. Then careful when you're pulling out to avoid damage. And then cut off 50% of the green tops to hasten takeoff. We've tried that even in trials on onion right in Kaduna, and we ended up with onions doing better without the cut off. So this is a school of thoughts where some people are for, some people are against, as it were. So it's up to you to see what you can do to cut off or not to cut off. But we've tried it in a trial. The ones we didn't cut off were quite better. Then when transplanting onion sets, do not blow them more than 1 inch under the soil, meaning you don't bury. I'm sure you can see from the picture, the neck should flush just at the level of the soil so that you don't bury them. When you get to a field where the transplanting is done in a haste, you will see almost half of the plant is even underneath. Sometimes you have to do some adjustment. So please, let's make sure that some of these tips, we use them in onion production. There are various methods of watering onion. Sometimes you see people do the furrow, which is almost 101% we see in the field. When you go into onion field, just surface irrigation. But when you go to advanced countries, we've seen people use the drip. If you see somewhere at the bottom of my presentation. Of course, sprinklers are also used for onion, and it's very advantageous to use the sprinklers because when we have maybe our second session on onion production, it helps to reduce trips because it forms like a disturbance. So you tend to chase away the trips, which is advantageous. But where you don't have the sprinklers, then you're having to deal with the drip or the surface irrigation. Be very ready to do insects, pest management, because trips will be there and they are horrible. When you have the trips on your onion, be sure nothing good will come out of your field. So we watch, or we will wait, for the next session where we will deal with issues around pests and diseases. So onion requires light and frequent irrigation, but what practices do we see in the field when we go? The farmers will want to water after 5 to 10 days, which is typical of a practice they do, and is a practice they grew into. And when you advise them, it's like, no, we've been doing that for the past X amount of years and it has been working, because they don't do a return on investment. All they do is, I got 50 bags of onions and then I feel like a king, I'm happy, and then I walk home. But if they calculate their productivity, it doesn't worth the stress. So it's very important we do the watering, not to water excessively. Soils differ. There are sandy soils, there are heavy soils. So where the soil is heavy, it's possible you can withdraw maybe a day. But where you see a plant on a dry crusted field for like 5-10 days without watering, it's really horrible. Don't forget, plants constitute almost about 80 to 90% water. And once the soil is dry, it's simple osmosis. The soil will like drain out the water out of the plant. And that fluctuation, of course, will affect yield at the end of the day. Then it's also good that we use light soils. It's very good. And when we have those light soil, you have to ensure you do a lot of watering because there is a lot of drainage of water down the soil. Then there should be general root health. You have to check. Sometimes if you don't understand the signals you're getting, you might have to maybe uproot a plant or two to check if the roots are okay. If the roots are okay, probably it's just the issue of, okay, it's demanding for water. But when it begins to rot under, then it's again another thing entirely, which we will be addressing some of these issues in our next webinar. Okay, there is also what we call splitting in onion, where you see as if it's giving birth to twins, triplets, or what have you. It's not a good indication. And sometimes it's either as a result of a varietal kind of threat, or if it's not, then stress from drought can actually lead to splitting. So please take note of this particular thing. This is just like a casual slide I just decided to drop. We all know the story. It's asking, why is onion expensive? And the onion is telling the garlic, hey guy, guess how much we worth now? Quite expensive. There are a lot of reasons why onion gets expensive in the course of the year, which is not so different from other commodities like we know, like the tomato, like the pepper, okra. Sometimes it disappears from the market that you have to pay through your nose to get. There are times where you get some funny sizes of onion. If you're not even careful, it's rotten, right? So there are a lot of factors like I mentioned earlier. Onion production drops during the wet season. The main season is usually the cold, dry season. Once the heat is coming, most onions are ready to get off the field. So one of the reasons why we have that fluctuation is as a result of sometimes even the varieties we plant, they are not the typical storage varieties. Because for onion, there are onions you plant for storage. For example, the Deo keeps very long. The new variety, the hybrid, even keeps longer. I also did a trial of shelf life for onions where I have close to 8 different varieties. The hybrid Zinaria F1 was the best, followed by Deo, followed by Super Yali and Prema, that kept against other varieties I picked from the market. So one can actually make arrangement to cultivate the onion or buy the onion and do a very good storage. And once the prices goes up, then you can dispose. And sometimes around August, you discover that completely onion is out of the market. It's even easier now where we have rainy season varieties and you see people planting. And if you're not even careful, some of these varieties might get rotten. It all depends on the type of soil you have or the kind of management practices you have. And typical of rainy season onion, you don't store. It's from farm to market, immediate, it's for immediate consumption, so much more that the typical onion that you store will even be better off than maybe the ones you planted in the wet season. So if you're just planting for consumption, then it's fantastic. And of course, you will be in business because at that period, everybody is ready to buy your onion. So this is just like an analysis from Lagos market, the prices of onion over 12 months, where you see at the beginning of the year, onion tends to be a little bit cheaper. But then on this table, I have the new onion, I have the dry onion, meaning onion that is well dried. There are some that comes out of the farm really, really fresh and wet, and it cannot even stay longer than 1 month, it begins to decay. So even when you go to the market, when you look at an onion, you really know that this onion looks good. It looks dry, it looks well cured compared to others. So you can see the prices fluctuate this is Lagos market, please be mindful, from 20,000 all the way to about 85,000. We can remember the story about 2 years ago, how onion became very scarce in the market. This is like for a typical bag, like 100-kilo bag. That is what the analysis is all about. Then this is just a typical field to show you that it is possible to irrigate onion with your drips. Because you can imagine somebody going into this field and then he's having to do manual watering. Imagine you have 20 hectares of onion. The question is, how do you even water? Even if you're watering 1 hectare, it means it will take you 20 days to water that whole field. I've seen in Senegal where people have grown 10, 20 hectares of onion with drip. So this is a possibility if you want to scale up. We cannot continue to do things manually and we think we want to achieve 50 tons per hectare. It's not possible. We have to employ some kind of technology. Curing onion. People don't really know this aspect of onion production. If you don't cure well, it doesn't store well. It means you need to allow the neck to close, literally. Let me put it that way. So the neck needs to close. And why is the neck closing very important to us? It is important because it closes the sources of infection in the onion. So what you do is you don't just cut the onion that same day as you're pulling your cutting and then you're storing. A lot of things will go wrong. So you have to pull, leave it in the field for it to cure a few days, and then you return to cut back the neck. And when you're cutting the neck, you don't cut it right on top of the onion. You have to give some space so that it will dry out, right? Then there's also what we call curing. Like I've said, after that, you need to cut and then you allow again for it to get a little bit dry, not to just directly put it into the sack. Then that becomes a disaster. That's what we call neck fall. Neck fall is a good indication to tell you that your onions is almost ready. And then you try to keep, okay, 2 things. Anyway, I didn't mention it because I'm not discussing fertilization of onion, but it's worth mentioning that for onion, 50 days after transplanting, you are not even supposed to apply fertilizer again. If you do, then it becomes like a luxury consumption and you will not end up with good neck falls. The neck is going to be very thick. And if you have onion to store or to keep, you will prefer to have thin necks. So factors that helps not to get the thick necks. One is fertilization. If you give it so much fertilizer, it becomes like an ajebota. It becomes horrible. If again you plant too far, if the spacing is too far, then you're telling it, okay, guy, you have enough space to blow up. Then it becomes very thick and it has that thick neck. So thick neck is not a desirable characteristic in onion production. Like you can see in the picture, the necks are really thin, really thin. So once it begins to fall, that is what we call the neck fall. And for you to have a good indication, when you have attained like 50% neck fall, what you do is for the ones that the necks have not fallen, if you check this picture, to the right-hand side, you discover some, it looks as if they want to fall, they are still standing, they're not looking as bad as some that the neck is completely down. You will now have to get a plank or something that looks like a plank, and then you sweep over the neck, meaning you're forcefully making them to have all neck fall. So once you do that, you allow for about 5 days to 1 week before you come and do the harvesting. And once you have attained that 50% neck fall and you have swept over the onion, please do not water again. You don't water again, you allow it to completely get a bit drained before you do your harvest. So this is just a typical storage structure for those that are interested in storing. Very important, you need good aeration. You need to do some turning. You need to do some sorting. If you don't do that, then the whole thing will get rotten. Yeah, so talking about partnerships in onion, we have been having a few engagement with field people, with processing companies, with smallholder farmers, and so on and so forth. This is a product maybe some of you have seen in the market. It's from Tiger Foods. And before now, onion is being imported from India, from China to do this dried onion processing. But we're having a lot of discussion to see how this can be done locally. So this year we're involving about 50 to 100 farmers in Kebbi and Sokoto through a partnership with another company called FarmBridge to see if we can, for the first phase, build trust. Because sometimes if you don't have the trust, then I think it's difficult to do anything. So this is just a pilot to see, okay, what can we achieve? Is it doable? Because if the human factor is not willing to do it, then you have a lot of difficulties. Even if you have the best variety, you have the best of inputs, there needs to be some kind of trust building. So we're setting up a pilot to see how we can produce onion locally, starting with having good varieties, also training the farmers, looking at where they're coming from, operation of about 2 tons, 3 tons, 5 tons per hectare, to where we have in our experimental plots and some other people that have tried our seeds. Some are operating almost about 15 tons per hectare, 10 tons per hectare, which is almost 5-10 times better than what the people are already doing. So that's just a brief on that. So with this, I wish everybody a good onion crop harvest if you want to venture into onion. Thank you very much for your audience. Moderator, I'm
Thank
done.
you so much. Thank you so much, Mrs. Yaro. Once again, I learned so many things from your presentation. But you know, all throughout the course of your presentation, one thing kept on coming back to me, and that is the 151 billion naira potential that we have in that space, and how we have not even begun to scratch the surface. And yet we have farmers out there asking, thinking every time, what can I plant? What can I do? How do I make money? And there's this potential that is, I don't know where we are in the 151 billion potential, but I'm sure we're not even halfway yet. So this is very interesting. Thank you very much. I've been one person that had been very interested in the onion market, especially since 2 years ago that we had the onion crisis in Nigeria. So thank you. And I think now we'll leave the floor open for questions. There are a number of comments in the chat group, but I think you can please send in your questions if you have questions. And if you have benefited from this, please invite other farmers, as we'll be going on to the part 2 probably next month. And let us have your email address so that we can send you the invite via email or your WhatsApp number. You can just put it in the chat. So I think at this time, I'll just leave the floor open for questions. If you would please like to ask a question, you can type it in the chat, or you can raise up your hands. I think we can just take about 1 or 2 questions directly. So I think I have a hand raised. We'll unmute Williams to ask his question before we take more from the chat. Thank you very much. Williams, I think you can unmute.
Thank you very much. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you very much for the good presentation. I'm a new person on this onions plantation. Let me start like this. I'm still a civil servant, preparing for retirement, what to fall back on after my office work. Initially, I want to leave early. So I got some land. So I've been thinking, what will I plant? What will I venture? Then what will it be gain for me? But when I come across this onion of a thing, in my house, I'm doing a pilot project. I've used bulb onions to plant some in the plastic. Then I use the seed to plant some in the nursery tray through the help of Mr. Taiwo on the Madam Show, Tade Show Mimo platform, a great woman. So when I now got this invite, I said, wow, I'm interested. So this is where I'm going. Hello? Hello?
Please go ahead. We can hear you.
So this is where I'm going. Paraventure, if I have interest in going for onions plantation for the sufficiency of onions in Nigeria, and as a new starter, how will I get there? Because all these seminars just look like someone is still playing something, so I don't normally get it right, like practical. I have a land. Could it be there will be a training, practical training for whoever that is interested? Then, do I need water on my farm? Are you with me? Before I can start planting of onions? And as an absentee farmer, can I venture into it? Because I'm still working. So I have somebody on my farm. So that's my question for now.
Did you want to take that, Mrs. Yaro?
Are you hearing
Yes,
me?
please.
Yes.
Yeah, I can hear you. Let me quickly take that. Farming is practical, that I must say. It's difficult to do farming by correspondence. And we've had several discussions on our platform, and we have physically seen where farmers have entrusted their business, which is not just about farming, but any other business you entrusted into workers and you don't have time to monitor or check or understand the business yourself, then you're in for plenty surprises. It just will not work. That is one. And like I said, farming is practical. You have to read, you have to go to the farm, you have to return back to check the books before it becomes a reality. An issue of water, if you don't have water in any type of farming, then you've not started farming. You need even reserved water. And then sometimes the mistake people do, I'm doing a raining season farming and they don't care to have a backup. Peradventure, there is a dry spell, you lose your investment. The cost of putting the water in place is cheaper than losing the whole of your investment, which it is said as unpredictable as the weather. The weather can be anything. Now we're talking about climate change and what have you, where if you talk to the older ones, they say, wow, when we're growing, it was not like this. The cold season doesn't come now, or the heat doesn't come this intense, or the rain does not cease for a period of 1 month, right? So you need water. That's an established fact. Then you spoke about using bulbs to plant, to get the onion. It's like it will take you 1 year to go on a journey, then you're preferring to take 5 years to go for that journey. There are implications when you plant bulbs. You're transferring, peradventure there is disease, you're transferring it from one generation to another. So for seed, you can imagine, you can just try that maybe behind your house in containers. Imagine you have to go 20 hectares onion. Now you're talking about bulbs. That's hell itself. So please, I think you need to take the right approach. It's doable, not like I'm discouraging you, but you really need to put a lot of things in place to venture into this onion production. And like you said, how do you learn? We have field staff, not everywhere, but at least in some states, and every season, each of these staff conducts about 20 fields, not just for onion. It cuts across different vegetables. We have our key crops in the north, we have our key crops in the south. But one thing is for the dry season, where we have our staff, there are at least 2 sites for onion. And these sites includes, we have in Ondo, we have in Ekiti, we have in Lagos, we have in Delta. We also have some other fields in the south. So you can tap into these opportunities, not just onion. We have a lot of demonstration fields going on with groups of farmers, and we don't just interact with one farmer. In a site, we need minimum of 50 farmers minimum to come together to learn from start to finish with our technical field officers. I don't know if I've answered you.
Yes, you have answered me. Then
Thank
another,
you.
hello, ma'am.
Thank you. We need to take other hands. We have other hands up. We have quite a number of hands up. If we're going to take a number, I think we need to be charitable and try to reduce.
Hello.
What did you say?
I said the last statement she mentioned about the training, I'm interested. I don't know, I'm interested. So if that could be the way out for me, I'm interested. So I would
No problem. There is on the flyer you saw for the invitation, there are emails you can channel your inquiries to. So that makes life easy. And of course, we have hotline numbers. Anywhere you are, once you drop, we would attend to you.
All right.
Just email to any of those numbers, it's fine.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There are quite a number of comments from Ishaku Yankasari. I think the question here, he made quite a number of comments. I think there's a question here that says that he plants local variety of onions, or he planted on the 24th of July, and he harvested this month, last week, but that maybe lack of rain, because of lack of rain, he didn't get good yields. And I think that's the closest to the question that he's asking. Every other thing is a comment. Then we have a question here from one Alimot Aziz, who says that anytime I plant onions, the size is not always encouraging. What can be the cause of this and the solution to this? If you would like to quickly answer that, Adisa.
Okay, key factors. Number one, the variety. Like I said earlier, you can't give what you don't have. Probably there are small sizes variety, that is one. And then two, again, the size of the bulb can be as a result of your management practices. If you don't feed it well, it ends up like that in small bulbs. Again, like I said, onion is day length sensitive. So if you don't know what variety to grow in a season, it ends up with small bulbs. Again, issues around temperatures. If the temperature is not favorable, you are bound to find yourself with small bulbs. So it could be any of the 4 items I've listed. So you need to know what to do, the right variety, the right season, because even our East-West seed varieties, you don't just throw it into any season. You get it wrong. So I think you need to dig deep to check what is the root cause of your issue from any of these I've listed.
Thank you. Can we have Engineer Daniel EJ, please? You can unmute and ask your question. Please let it be less than 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you for this opportunity that you gave me to ask questions. Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful presentation. I think I'm privileged to be part of it. It's a nice one. So my question is this. I live in my agro environment, the agro climate is a challenge in that rainy season, we are always having low temperatures. So you said you've been doing research for 2 years, that you've been planting onion every month. So what is the germination like against the month? And if I want to plant onion, which would you recommend for me from the month of May to October?
Okay. Speaking on that, for onion, there are no-go areas. When I say no-go areas, you can't even plant, just keep this month out. June, July, August, they are not good windows to plant onion anywhere, whether in the north, the south, in the east, or in the west. Keep off June, July, August. And then usually when people say raining season onion, I always emphasize, it does not mean that in the middle of the raining season you are planting. It means you should plant it some months before the peak of the raining season. That is what we call raining season onion. And of course, talking about varieties, if you want the wet season varieties, starting from maybe April, you have to stick to only Prema, only, not Deo, not Super Yali, because they are day length sensitive. They are short day onion. Then apart from that, there are other hybrid varieties we have, but have not launched in Nigeria, the Red Star F1 and the Red Jewel F1. They are tropical onion. They are not short day onion. I don't know if I've answered you.
Okay. The germination, what is it like?
It doesn't even germinate. We've even lost it completely.
Okay.
It doesn't even germinate. It's horrible. It doesn't germinate because it's sensitive to day length.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, engineer.
Thank you. We have a question from Raymond. It says, how can we manage pests, fungi, and storage on onion plantation?
Story for another day.
Okay. So that will probably be part 2, the one we're having next month.
Absolutely. Yes,
so Raymond, watch out for next month, where we'll answer questions on pests and storage of onions. There's Ridwanu Abdullahi, and he says, why after 60 days of planting we cannot fertilize onions?
Because it's a waste. It becomes consumption. You don't need to, because it doesn't need it. It's like when you say, for children, we give them Cerelac and NAN between the ages of maybe 1 to 3. Then I am in SS1, or I'm 18 years old, or I'm in a secondary school, and I tell my mom, why don't I take Cerelac? It just does not fit in, right? So I think maybe this analogy will make you understand. There's no need to it, it doesn't need it. And remember I spoke about the thick necks. You want thick neck so that it will cure properly. So when you give it, it will not say no, but at the end of the day, you'll be at the receiving end. And then for every economist, you should know that at a particular point, when you continue to spend, at the end of the day, it makes no sense. So why spend when it doesn't need it, right? I hope I've answered that.
Yes, thank you. So let's take Farmer Toby. You can unmute, please. You have 1 minute to ask your question. Farmer Toby, please unmute.
Yeah, thank you for having me. My question is, you mentioned the use of drip tape, you mentioned the use of sprinklers, but can I use rain gun? Can I use rain gun for irrigation?
You can, as long as it comes like a rain, it's okay. But then be mindful again of the force. If it's too, you wash away your field. But what I've seen generally, best practices, you even use sprinklers where you have excess water. The decision to use what sort of irrigation method depends on
water availability,
the available materials you have, right? So if you feel it will serve the purpose, I've not seen that work. What I've seen work is the surface irrigation we have in Nigeria. And then if you go elsewhere, you see the use of drip tapes. Like you have seen a lot of changes in the way farmers cultivate vegetable. I can tell you, you don't even see the drip tapes. And of course, a lot of development is more in the south than in the north. So the time will come that even in the north, we want to see our farmers using drip tapes, especially the very big ones that have 5, 10, 15 hectares of onion. It's a nightmare to do the watering. That is why they cannot afford to even water every 2 days. They can only water after 10 days. And I give you an analogy. I have 20 hectares. Maybe the max I can do in a day is 1 hectare. So it means it takes me 20 days to get to the end of the farm before I return. Right?
My place is close to a dam, so I have access to water.
Excellent. That's fine.
Okay, thank you. There's a question.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's a question from Kokabes, and it says, I have some onion seeds. Mr. Fottergill Hunter River Brown. Is it advisable to be planted in the western part of Nigeria?
Sorry, I lost that. Did you call the name of a variety?
I think that's what it is. It's Mr. Fottergill Hunter River Brown. I think that's the name of the variety. And it's asking if it can be planted in the western part of the country.
Well, I'm not in a position to answer that because it's not east-west. Like you will know, the manufacturer is in a better position to advise you. So I remain quiet to that.
Okay, thank you. We'll just take a few more hands. 1 minute per hand, please. Let's have Masood Abdullahi. You can unmute.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I will start by thanking the presenter for a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. I'm Masood Abdullahi by name, an onion farmer also living in Kano State. And also I go around in Sokoto, the largest onion producer and Kebbi. Thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. I have a couple of questions. The first one is goes to Madam Khadija. The first question is, please, what is the best fungicide used for the control of pink rot disease? And the second, sorry, don't hear me.
Hello.
Are you with me?
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. Sorry, please. The biological and the chemical control, please, for the control of pink rot disease. The second part is a clarification regarding planting of June, July, and August. I saw in Sokoto some farmers raise nursery in the 15th of July, and also in the mid of August, and also towards the end of August, they start transplanting. So that recommendation of not planting onion in June, July, also August, is it specific to your seed east-west or even including other local varieties the farmers are used to in those areas?
Okay,
and my final question, my final question also, please can we have the presentation or the presentation slides? Thank you so much once again.
Okay, let me quickly go ahead and answer because we're almost outside the period of presentation. Number one, you spoke about fungicide. I don't want to prolong anything about pest disease control until the next webinar. So you be patient and look forward for the next webinar. Then planting in June, July, it's possible, but not for bulbs. Likely is for the leaves. Likely is for the leaves, not for bulbs. And even if you see the bulbs, then they are not table-sized bulbs. They are really, really tiny. I did a lot of work in Sokoto and Kebbi, so I know that market very well. Maybe spring onion. If you check my presentation, there are two types of onion. We have the dry onion, we have the green onion. And then you know in the market, you go and you see a lot of fresh onion, but not for bulbs. Please take note. Then the third one you will get if you drop your email, and we should send out the presentations. Thank you very much. Hello? Is the moderator there? Madam Falaki, are you there?
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't realize I was still muted.
Okay, that's fine.
So, we have a question from Raymond. It says if we are to start planting in August, what will happen around June, July, when they are already bringing out balls? Remember, June, July is when we have heavy rainfall in the south.
It will survive. It will survive. Not that it's from the beginning. You don't start planting in those months. You avoid those months planting. But once you plant sometimes in March, April, by the time it gets to June, July, it's already grown. We just had a field day. We're in October, isn't it? We just had a field day in the south. If you check our Facebook page, if you check our social media handle, you would see field days. We still have some field days somewhere in Sokoto and Kebbi at the moment. Even in Katsina, we have field days for onion. We didn't plant in those months. It has to be before those months, else you end up with a lot of foliar diseases. The implication is, at that period, peradventure, you have ground fungal disease or pests or what have you. They are already grown. They are more prone to withstand than for you to start from the scratch in those window periods, please. Take note.
Thank you. Let's quickly take Mr. Adams. You have 1 minute to ask your question. Please unmute. Mr. Adams.
All right, thank you very much. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, wonderful presentation, Adiza. Thank you very much. I want to ask about intercropping with onions. Down here where we are where most of our farmers do not engage in strict monocropping. We do a bit of mixed veg cultivation. So in terms of the impact on the yield of onion, would you advise yes or no? And if yes, what are the possible crops that we can intercrop with?
Okay, Sahid, thank you for that question. Thank you very much. Typical of East-West, you know what we say, we don't advise that you mix one crop or the other. If you have 1 acre of land, it's better you split into 4 parts if you have 4 different crops and you feed each on its own. So we don't advise you do intercrop with any of those vegetables, right? So that is what if you want to do onion, take out a 10 by 20 or a 10 by 50 or whatever and do your onion on that field. And then the other portion, you can do your carrots, you can do your sweet corn, you can do your cabbage. That is my candid advice, but not to go in between.
Okay. Thank you. Let's take a question from Kendedo. You have 1 minute. Please unmute. Mr. Idowu there? Are you there, Mr. Idowu? Okay, while we wait for him, I think we can have Wasiu Ralfu. Mr. Wasiu, 1 minute, please ask your question and you can unmute. Wasiu Ralfu. Okay.
Okay. Hello.
Yes, please go ahead.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I actually come in very, very late. I missed a whole lot of team. I've dropped my email. That's my first request. I've dropped my email. So I would love if you can please send me this presentation so that I can go through it. Because as much as I love to be an onions farmer, I don't know anything about it. I've tried nursery about 2-3 different times, but the moment they germinate, they will all die. They will all die. So I actually want to find a means of getting it right. From the questions that others has already asked, I think I've got 1 or 2 things. So that's just exactly what I want. If I can get that presentation so that I can go through it, then from there, probably I can ask 1 or 2 questions later. And Madam Presenter, please, I don't know if it's possible for me to either get your number or your email address so that I can keep a communication with you, because I want to know more about these onions. And like I said earlier, I miss virtually everything. So please, if you can do that for me, I will really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. For those who want a copy of the recording, please send your email address and your WhatsApp address also on the chat, and we'll get it across to you as soon as it's out. You are able to reach the presenter on any of the email addresses you have on the invite. So you got an e-invite, the email addresses, there are about 4 email addresses and some numbers on there. You're able to reach the presenter on any of those email addresses. Thank you. We'll take the last question. Okay, I think Mr. Idowu says is unable to unmute. We'll give you a chance to unmute now and quickly ask your question because we are rounding up in the next 5 minutes. So, Mr. Idowu, can you please unmute? And ask your question. You can unmute. Mr. Idowu, you can unmute.
Maybe you unmute.
I've asked him to unmute. He's able to unmute. While we wait for him, let's take the last question from Tade Wenimo. Tade Wenimo, you have 1 minute and you can unmute.
Thank you for the presentation. Please, I want to know more about weeding inside the onion farm. How do we? Can we use herbicide or should be done manually all the time?
I will put that in my presentation on management, but there are chemicals that is herbicide you can use for onion. I don't know how available it is in the market, but where onion production has gone so advanced in India, we have colleagues there that have told us it's possible to have chemicals to spray against your weeds. So that is possible. So watch out for our next presentation for that details. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And I think Mr. Idowu is unmuted now if you want to ask your question so that we can close.
Yeah, good evening. Good evening.
Good evening, please go ahead. Go ahead, please.
Number 1, how accessible are the planting materials? Then number 2.
Material here is what? See?
Number 2. How do you have a good link to get processing equipment for somebody who wants to go into processing of hello?
Yes, please.
I think
how do we get the contact?
How do you get what? Processing.
Can you give us a contact? Processing equipment for onions.
Processing
onions
equipment.
to process onions. Yes, processing equipment. Yep.
Equipment to process onions.
Okay, let me take the first question. When you say planting material, do you mean seed? I want to be sure.
Whichever you recommend for Southwest, anything that's viable for Southwest.
Okay, let me take it. You mean seeds? Seeds are seeds are available. Just get through our hotline number anywhere in Nigeria, we will be reached. And in the chat box, I dropped our hotline number. Once we get your call, and then we direct to the appropriate channel. That's for seats, that's one. Then two, your second question on processing equipment. Unfortunately, we're a seed company. We really don't have that information. But sometimes we link up with, if we're able to search and get that information, we can pass to you. But then I think the world is in your palms. Just go online and search. I'm sure you should get 1,001 companies advertising processing equipment for only processing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And VD&S Farmer Center is an input step, so you can get any kind of you want from the Farmer Center. Thank you very much, everybody. I think at this point, we begin to call it a day. And on behalf of VD&S Farmer Center, we want to say a big thank you to Royal Blue Contractors and East West Seed International, and most especially to our speaker of today, Mrs. Hadiza Yaro, because once again, she has enriched us with knowledge. We appreciate our sponsors, Know Your Farm Hands, and we say a big thank you to all of you great farmers who have set out time to attend today's webinar. At VD&S Farmer Center, our aim is to positively impact farmers' lives and businesses, and we trust we have been able to add value to you. For further questions and other clarification, please contact us at info@vdsfarmsonline.com. Thank you and God bless you. The seminar continues next month with part 2 of onion production in Nigeria. If you would please like to be a part of this, drop your email address and your WhatsApp number in the chat and ensure you invite other farmers. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.